Welcome back to another week of Pirate Report. Thank you for joining us. We got a big show tonight. We got a few topics and some lovely people to introduce them. I'm joined by Blair Yusko, Elijah Weintraub, and Christine Franco. And the first story we've got today is the blockbuster trades going on in the NFL. Blair, if you would please catch everyone up and give us a little insight on what's going on in the NFL.
Yeah, well, first off, looking forward to today's show, talking a few different topics here. But yeah, this was a pretty crazy week in the NFL. June 1st, 2026 will go down as one of the more memorable days when you consider the two blockbuster trades that took place. Myles Garrett to the Rams, A.J. Brown to the Patriots. A.J. Brown was kind of expected. This was something that I think everybody knew was going to happen once the post June 1st date hit. It was just a matter of if not when. With the ending there in Philly, there was clearly a fracture in the relationship between him and Jalen Hurts, and they're moving in a different direction. New offensive coordinator, a little bit of a new era there for them after a disappointing wild card exit. So that was kind of expected. So I'll dive a little bit more into that here in a few minutes. But the one that I think really struck the NFL world by surprise more so than the A.J. Brown trade was the Myles Garrett trade to the Rams. Full details of the trade: Rams get Myles Garrett. Cleveland gets Jared Verse, who has been a stud for LA the first 2 years of his career. 2027 first round pick, a 2028 second round pick. They also get a third round pick in 2029, which has an interesting condition to it. It can be a first round pick if the Rams end up trading Myles Garrett to a team within the AFC North. So if Myles Garrett somehow in 2 years from now ends up back in the AFC North, that of some way this trade doesn't work out, the Rams could turn this, or the Browns rather, could turn this into two first round picks. From the Rams angle, I mean, they're all in. This is a team that just gave an extension to Matthew Stafford. This is a team that won a Super Bowl a few years ago, a team that is knocking on the doorstep of the Super Bowl last year, right? NFC title game against the Seahawks, lost that game. All three of those games against Seattle were amazing games. And a team that fell just short. But you look at the offense, you look at the quarterback, you look at the coach, they're going to be right back into position right away again this season. And now you add a future Hall of Fame pass rusher coming off of a 23 sack season in which he broke the single season NFL sack record, a guy that year in and year out, you talk about the definition of consistency, you talk about an elite player at his position. Myles Garrett is that. And I think a lot of times when you look at edge rushers in the NFL and you look at pass rushers in the NFL, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say sacks are the end all be all. Pressures are important, QB hits are important, hurries are important. All those things are important. But when you talk about just a guy that's going to go out there year in and year out and dominate and rack up the sack numbers, rack up the stats, like Myles Garrett is the definition of that. Every pass rusher that gets drafted in the first round, the dream is that he is on the level of a Myles Garrett. This is one of the all-time greats at the position, 125 and a half sacks in his career. So from the Rams' perspective, you're getting the best, arguably one of the best defensive players in the entire league to pair with the quarterback in Matthew Stafford and the offense that they have. A quarterback that won the MVP last year, is aging very well, aging like fine wine. This is a guy who's gotten better since he got traded to the Rams at 38 years old. He's coming off of one of his best seasons statistically, on top of the wide receiver tandem that they have in Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. You add Myles Garrett to the mix defensively. They went out earlier this offseason as well and added Trent McDuffie from the Chiefs as he enters year five, former first round pick. So this continues along the lines of Les Snead, his ability to move on from draft picks. It's funny, one of the first round picks that he had was Jared Verse. Now they trade him. They had a first round pick this year. Obviously, they used that on Ty Simpson. The Rams are the poster organization in the NFL, the big example in the NFL of just how to operate the right way year in and year out, and to find talent in the middle rounds. It's funny because they move on from all these first round picks, yet they're able to find really good talent in the middle rounds. And that's a credit to the general manager and Les Snead. So from a Rams perspective, you love the trade. It makes a ton of sense. And to be honest with you, from a Browns perspective, I like the trade too. I know a lot of people are crushing Cleveland and destroying the Browns, and they're easy to destroy. They're easy to talk down on because it's the Cleveland Browns. I mean, I'm a Jet fan. I know what it is to watch losing football. I know what it is to be an organization that just makes terrible moves year in and year out, bad ownership, all those different things. But from a Cleveland Browns perspective, they're not in a win now mode. And this is a player who wanted out. Let's not forget that last offseason he requested a trade. They ended up giving him a extension, but after the coaching change, Stefanski out, he goes to Cleveland. Jim Schwartz didn't return as the defensive coordinator. That felt like the end for Myles Garrett. I think one of the only things that was keeping Myles Garrett in Cleveland was Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator. And once he left that building, I think Myles Garrett looked at that coaching staff. There clearly wasn't a very good relationship between him and Todd Monken. I mean, Monken came out this week and said I had no contact with him. I mean, a head coach having no contact with a star player, that's just not going to work. So from Cleveland's perspective, you get away from a guy that was unhappy there. Let's just tell like it is. And they're not one player away. They desperately need draft capital. They desperately need as many different pieces as they can get. So to get another first round pick, now there's a good chance that first round pick is 32nd overall, because if you ask me right now in June who I think's winning the Super Bowl, I think the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl this year. So I think there's a good chance that's a late round pick. But in a draft class in 2027 that many people look at as being potentially historically good, especially when you take into account the quarterbacks that'll be available. When you look at Cleveland's quarterback situation, they are probably going to be in the market for a quarterback, bearing a Shedeur Sanders breakout season, which we'll even see if that happens. Deshaun Watson, there's a possibility he's the starter week 1. So we'll even see what happens with Shedeur and when he's out there and when he plays and how much he actually plays this year. But to add more ammo to next year's class, 2 first-round picks now, and Jared Verse, let's not talk down on the guy. He is a very, very good player. This is a guy who came in and in 2 years with the Rams made a big-time impact. 12 sacks across the 2 seasons was a big reason for the Rams' success over the last 2 years. So I'm not going to sit here and say Jared Verse is Myles Garrett, but that's not the type of player he needs to be. But this is a really good football player out of Florida State. He returns home, grew up in the Cleveland area, Dayton, Ohio, actually, so has some experience from the area. He goes back home. He's a very good player. So they get a really good player who's only entering year 3. They get a few draft picks, a first-round pick. I like the trade from Cleveland for a team that's not in a win-now mode. So that's the biggest one. In terms of the A.J. Brown trade, I don't think anybody's surprised. I think if you asked any NFL fan back in January or February where A.J. Brown would end up, I think we all knew he was going to be the New England Patriots. As I mentioned earlier, it was really just a matter of if, not when, with A.J. Brown. In terms of the details, they get a 2028 first, so first-round pick 2 years from now. So Philly won't get a 27 first out of this, but they do get a 2027 fifth-round pick. The reality with A.J. Brown and Philly, it got stale. Typically wide receiver, quarterback duos after a while, sometimes they can just get old after a while. They can get stale. A.J. Brown mentioned it a few days ago that the relationship between him and Jalen Hurts clearly declined. And I think any football fan that has watched the Eagles over the last few years, even the year they win the Super Bowl 2 years ago, there was clearly a disconnect from him reading books on the sidelines, some of his cryptic posts on social media, some of his cryptic post-game interviews. There was a very weird vibe between Hurts and A.J. Brown, and I think this past season was kind of the pinnacle of that, where they have that early playoff exit. They lose to San Fran. A.J. Brown did not have a good game in that wild card game. All year long, A.J. Brown was very much up and down. There was weeks where him and Jalen Hurts were connecting, and then there was weeks where it felt like he wasn't even a part of the offense. So this is a guy who it got stale after a while. He now goes to New England. They get a legitimate number 1 for Drake May and a piece who reunites with Mike Vrabel. When you go back to Tennessee, Mike Vrabel never even wanted to make that trade with A.J. Brown. That was all the front office. That was not a Mike Vrabel decision. So they now reunite, and from a New England perspective, their wide receiver room gets much deeper. This was a team last year that had Stephon Diggs as their number 1 wide receiver. You add A.J. Brown to the mix, that's better. He's a consistent piece. You add on top of what they added with Romeo Doubs this offseason. So New England, who was in the Super Bowl last year, has a chance to try and repeat that in what is a loaded AFC.
I do want to pose the question to you. Do you think A.J. Brown may be a net negative in the locker room in the Patriots locker room if he's not getting the ball enough? I know that was a big issue around Stephon Diggs most of his career. I think it went down quite a bit when he was on the Patriots this last year, actually. But do you think AJ Brown is going to be that guy if he's not getting the ball every time? Because, like you said, it's a very stacked wide receiver room, and AJ Brown is a guy who believes himself to be the number one wide receiver, maybe in the NFL. And I just want to pose that question. Do you think he's going to get upset if he's not getting fed the ball enough?
Yeah, I mean, he probably will. It's a very good chance that happens. He is that kind of diva type wide receiver. I think a lot of wide receivers are kind of the diva type, and wide receiver is a weird position because it's the one job on the football field that you're relying on somebody else to essentially create your success. Like if you're not getting past the football, you're not going to get paid, you're not going to get opportunities. I think his relationship with Vrabel, I think Drake May and the season he had last year, I think AJ Brown is in an offense where they're going to cater to him, like they should force feed him the football. He's the clear cut number one guy. He is a definite upgrade over what they had last year in Stephon Diggs. I mean, sure, will there probably be complaints? Will there be weeks where he doesn't get the football and he's on the sideline and he's, body language isn't great? Probably, because that's just the way he is. That's the type of player he is. That's kind of his personality. But I don't think it's a major issue. I also think Mike Vrabel knows how to handle him from their time in Tennessee. They're close. So if there even were those issues, I think from a coaching staff perspective, they would be able to kind of handle that stuff. And I think offensively, they're going to cater it to where he's the main focal point. In Philly, it felt like that was little by little going away in terms of him being the main focal point of the offense and having a quarterback that could consistently deliver him the ball on time and on target.
I wanted to go ahead and talk about these two trades for a second. First off, I want to say, what was with June 1st and being the day that everybody decided to move around? We saw the Giants made a couple moves. A.J. Brown was that day. And then we saw Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett was a big shock to me. I'm a Seahawks fan, and I'm scared to be for this Rams team. We took care of him 3 times this year, but I am scared. Myles Garrett is such a great player. We know he wanted out of the Browns so badly, and now he's with the Rams. I am quite scared. I'm nervous now. Heading over to the Eagles and to A.J. Brown as he moves over to the Patriots, I think this is a great pickup because this is a New England team that struggled in the offensively. Their offensive line didn't do so great. Offensively, the team was awful. If we look back at the Super Bowl run when they played Seattle, Drake May was in a lot of trouble. And I think now when you have an experienced guy like A.J. Brown, I think this team is going to be okay. And also, we need to keep in mind, Drake May, this was his first Super Bowl last year. A.J. Brown, he's won a Super Bowl, so he knows how this game plays. So if we do see the Patriots go back to the Super Bowl, now there's a little bit more experience added to the table.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is a very good point that you make. As I had to call him Will T-Rex Arms Campbell, I would move him inside personally. He's not good enough outside as a tackle. He got completely destroyed in the Super Bowl. The offensive line is an interesting point. They went out and added AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker, who actually played for the Jets up until this point. Very injury prone, but when he's out there, he's one of the better versatile offensive linemen in the NFL. So, yeah, there's certainly some questions. I still look at New England and say that they're probably going to finish second. I still look at Buffalo and think that they're the team to beat in the AFC East, even though New England won the division last year, but only time will tell. Look, you had a guy that was in the mix for MVP last year, a quarterback. In theory, he should only get better.
Yeah, great delve into the trades going around the NFL this week. And I'm also a Seahawks fan, so I'm going to shout out Russell Wilson for retiring. So great guy who played in Seattle, and it's unfortunate that he's leaving the league, and hopefully he's on to bigger and better things. But now we're going to move on to Eli. You've got a story for us about the MTA and New Jersey Transit as we get closer and closer. We're just 1 week out now at the time of recording from the first World Cup game. So give us a breakdown on how New Jersey and New York are handling that.
Well, thank you very much. And New Jersey Transit, my question is, are they ready for this World Cup? We look at these past events that New Jersey Transit was responsible for transportation, such as the Super Bowl 48, just a long time ago, really, at this point, WrestleMania, and we look at a typical Giants and Jets football game, and they couldn't handle it. If you go back to Super Bowl 48, yes, it was a long time ago. They could not handle 35,000 people when the game ended. What happens now when you're promising rail fans 40,000 people you promise to take to Secaucus and then eventually to New York City? How do you promise that? And you look at the typical Giants and Jets game. We have to minus that for a second here, and here's why. In a typical Giants and Jets game, people start leaving the third, fourth quarter because, well, the game's pretty much over. And Blair, you know this very well because you're a Jets fan. You know the game's over by the third, fourth quarter. There is no waiting to the final whistle. In soccer, it's not like that. Every soccer fan, if we look at every match globally, they wait till that final whistle blows and then they leave the game. I think pre-game, as I call it, before entering the game, I think New Jersey Trains will be perfectly fine because everybody comes at their own pace, leisure, and time. At the end of the game, I think that's when we have to worry. This is where we have to say to ourselves, can they handle the pressure? Can they handle it? And I don't think they can, quite frankly. I don't think that they can. I don't think they're ready to handle 40,000 people and take them back to New York City. And here's one example I also want to bring up too. Meadowlands Rail Station, which is the station next to MetLife Stadium, that's where they're bringing all these people to, has 3 tracks, 3 platforms. When one train leaves, they have to get another in. But those 3 tracks go down to 2. So remember, it's like a road. One way to Secaucus, one way to the Meadowlands. It's like a road, it's a street. How I look at it. It does take time. It doesn't take 2 seconds to just move one train onto a track and another. By the time you throw switches, get the signals through. Yeah, I study rail fanning, so I kind of know this stuff. But like, it takes a while. It's not a 2-second thing. And people want to go home. They really enjoy the game and stuff, but they want to go home. And the thing is, there's no other solution. If you look at parking, it's $225 to go park at the American Dream Mall, which is right next door to the stadium, and there's no parking on site. That is a big issue. But the real concern is the regular commuters. There are 4 weekday matches, 4 weekends, and 4 weekday. The weekday commuters are pretty much in trouble, and a lot of trouble. And New Jersey Transit said to work home, basically. They don't even want you commuting at this point. And makes sense, because if you look at their article, they said, okay, there's no stops to Secaucus unless you're going to the game. And then during the game is over, we're not sending trains to New York. You're going to end up in Newark, and then you have to take a path or a bus to get to New York Penn Station and to wherever else you're going in New York City. There is no other plan for them. And if you look at a normal rail lines like Maine, Bergen, and Pascagoula Valley lines, which are the lines that don't go to New York, they go to Hoboken, they're bypassing Secaucus, but they all have to wait for those Meadowlands trains to go first before they can even go through. There is just so much happening that they're not picturing. I mean, for a rail fan and commuters, they're in trouble, I think. They're really in trouble. And I also want to make point one clear. Amtrak is not affected by this. Only New Jersey Transit trains are affected, and they will not be going to New York. And lastly, if the Knicks force a game 6, what up the Knicks fans that are trying to go to Madison Square Garden? Did we ever think about that? That's my other point. They're going to be in trouble. They can't get to the game if game 6 happens, which hopefully it doesn't. And yeah. So, and I know for you, Christina, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like Elijah, I feel like you bring up a lot of good points. When I was researching like how NJ Transit has dealt with really big events, the 2014 Super Bowl did come up. NJ Transit severely underestimated the number of riders, and it led to massive overcrowding, hour-long delays, and especially congestion at Secaucus Junction, which is like one of the most vital train junctions we have in Jersey. Mm-hmm. That like even though it was 12 years ago, obviously we've had a lot to learn, but they could probably reference that to try to figure out what they're going to do for the World Cup. That exposed so many of the weaknesses we have in our transit system, and the World Cup is going to be even harder. It lasts for weeks. There's a bunch of matches, and fans are going to come from many different countries, and they're unfamiliar with our transit system, so I know it's going to be a mess. And my biggest concern is impact on regular commuters. Commuters are already frustrated because they had to deal with a lot of delays from the Port of North Bridge project, which ended in like March, I believe, 3 months ago.
And it's still not done.
Exactly. And that led to modified timetables and a bunch of suspended lines. And I know a lot of people, we go to Seton Hall, it's in South Orange. I know a lot of people that commute and rely on NJ Transit to get to school, and it was like you had to do jumping jacks to get to school. Like, it was insane. So I feel like the real question is like not whether NJ Transit can get the soccer fans to MetLife. It's whether they could do it while still serving the hundreds of thousands of people who rely on the system to commute to school and work every day. So yeah, that's my piece. I hope because I feel like they're putting a lot of energy into, of course it's a big event, but I feel like they should have the same amount of consideration for the people who commute every day.
And I would like to add one point to what you just said about the commuters and everything that they've been affected. If we look at the past 2 weeks and stuff, including this week, there was an Amtrak fire on the 29th of May. And because of that, affecting this week into June, there are still delays and cancellations and suspensions just because of an Amtrak fire in a tunnel, because only two tunnels to get to New York City via train. Because of that, the commuters are already suffering, already in pain trying to get to work and where they need to go. Now add the traditional delays that New Jersey Transit is typically known for, and add the World Cup where you're skipping stops and not even getting to your destination. It's just a nightmare waiting to happen. And I know, Blair, we follow this guy named Frank the Tank, who we know loves to talk about this New Jersey Transit and stuff, and that's how he became viral and stuff. You know, is he going to go viral over this too now?
He might. Yeah, the good old Frank the Tank NJ Transit rants never get old. Um, yeah, I kind of echo what you two. I mean, if we're being honest, one of the biggest disgraces in this state's probably NJ Transit. No pun intended, but this entire thing with the whole World Cup just sounds like a giant train wreck waiting to happen in terms of people leaving, in terms of the amount of people there. I mean, Eli, you kind of hinted at it. I'm obviously a huge Jet fan. I go to a lot of games. Last year, being at school, I took the South Orange train out of South Orange to Secaucus to get over to MetLife. I mean, it was a 20-point blowout against Buffalo where the game was over before it even started, and leaving the stadium was a mess. I mean, there's overcrowded trains, well, lines extremely, extremely long. To be honest with you, I look at the whole World Cup as just a giant mess waiting to happen. I don't really quite understand why they even chose Jersey. I know they're promoting it as New York, but this is kind of a side note to the whole NJ Transit Stadium. The stadium is nothing special. It's a giant AC unit, if we're being honest. I don't think that entire area, to be honest with you, I don't think is. I think the whole state, I think, completely screwed up that whole area. As somebody that goes there multiple times every year, I think the whole American Dream Mall, I think they could have done things so much differently going even back
Absolutely.
to the whole Prudential Center. I always look at Philly as an example of how they have all three stadiums in the same spot. They've got like a live area for music, Xfinity Live, all that stuff. I look at MetLife, and it's really nothing short of embarrassing that they have a stadium in the middle of the parking lot. They got the Giants training facility. They have the abandoned Izod Center still there.
That's
And
right.
then they plop a mall in the middle of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. They could have done something so differently back when they built Prudential, back when they built MetLife, of putting together those two stadiums in the same area, putting a live music area, all those different things, as opposed to an abandoned arena, a football training facility, and now a new American Dream Mall that it just feels like it's taking up space. So I think the whole area just isn't ready. Plus the traffic getting out of there.
Oh,
Forget
that's
about
another
getting on the
area.
NJ, the turnpike, paying the tolls. Um, it's not a very good place to enjoy a sporting event. It's not, and maybe I'm biased because I usually walk out of there with a loss. So maybe it's just because I naturally don't have very good memories going there. But I just think the whole area is. I don't think it's ready for it, to be honest with you. I think the whole area is kind of there's a lot left to be desired for the MetLife area. That whole, I mean, they spent the same amount of money on Cowboys AT&T Stadium as they did MetLife, and how the two can look so drastically different is besides me. But that's my take. I think NJ Transits, they don't sound ready at all, and it doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah, definitely lots of things to consider for those fans who are local, but also for international fans. If we have anyone listening in, this is certainly something to consider when making your plans coming to the United States. But moving on from that, we do have a pop culture roundup. Christine is going to walk us through our week one breakdown of Love Island. So take it away, Christine.
Okay. At the time we are recording this, it's only been 2 episodes so far, so we've only gone through the first coupling, and then now a few recouplings because some bombshells entered the villa. So not much to say about that yet. Everyone's still like kind of getting their personalities out there and getting to know each other. So as the drama gets on, we'll continue to like kind of keep an eye on that. But a lot of the controversy surrounding Love Island this season has been surrounding like before we even got to the villa. Like the premiere happened last night at the time we were filming this, and we already had like a bunch of cast changes. So one of the biggest controversies was one cast member got removed like a few days before the premiere because an online video resurfaced of her using a racial slur. So Peacock had to cut ties with her, and then she had to be taken off of the beginning roster, which led to another member also having to be removed just to make the boys and girls even. Um, another cast member or contestant, was facing online criticism because fans had found out that she is MAGA and she supports Trump, which her brother has recently come out and saying, no, we're not Trump supporters anymore, but I'm not sure if I believe that. So a lot of people, it is a fan voted show, so a lot of people are like, get her off my island. So production had to issue warnings about fan behavior. They were like, guys, especially due to previous seasons, we've seen like a lot of bullying and like online harassment. So they were like, guys, please don't do that anymore. Stop this toxicity, please. Before the show even started and it's a reality show, so people are gonna get their opinions out anyways, but seeing it in real time, especially when the contestants don't know what's going on, is kind of insane. And then another kind of, I don't know if it's a controversy because the fans don't really care, but this guy does. One of the contestants is a police officer, and he had quit his job right before going on to Love Island, so he could be on because they're there for like 3 months if they make it to the end, I believe. And not 3 months. I think it's like 1 or 2. There's like ends up being like 60 episodes, and there's like an episode every day, which is insane. But yeah, the mayor of his town that he was a cop in, like was hating on him for resigning, and he was like, the city has lost so many taxpayer dollars to put you through academy, and we're having staffing sort of shortages, so this is like a big hit to our state police state, I'm not sure, police station or whatever. And that was a whole thing, but like the fans are just like, let him live his life, like it doesn't really hurt us. But yeah, those are like most of the controversies that have going on. I would like to open the floor to you guys, see what you guys think, especially on the cop one. I thought that was pretty interesting, and then we could kind of go into like fan culture and like how the online sphere like kind of plays into these types of shows. If you guys have any comments.
Yeah, well, I want to go back to your officer story that you brought up from in Pennsylvania. That officer was from, and I am 50-50 on this story because for one, I'm on the verge of saying, hey, that's his dream. If that's his dream to be on a reality competition TV show, have at it. Because you know what? That's just what our reality should be. You know, if you have a dream, that's your dream. Be my guest. However, I could see why there's controversy because it is a long time. I saw the show tapes. 42 to 45 days. It takes about 6 weeks. That is a long time. And and that makes sense for why frustration's blooming in the air. And usually when you take that much time off, usually it's because maternity leave and all that other stuff. And if we look at other reality shows, for example, like America's Got Talent, which is like a competition show, it's on NBC, they tape, back in November, the auditions and stuff. And then the live shows don't have it until a year later, in September. And then it goes like one day a week, but it's not like consistent 42 days in 6 weeks like the show is. So I could see why there is controversy. And even if you look at a game show perspective, like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, they tape 5 shows a day within a course of like 5 days or so. I guess that's makes a lot more sense than 42 days. It's a long time, and I completely understand that. But this is reality TV. That's why it's here. It's meant to be long. It's meant to be dramatic. It's meant to have storylines that go crazy, make fans wonder, wow, this is interesting. They really started to like hate each other, love each other. This is like, that's what it's all about. That's reality TV.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on it is the people are going to pay for what they want to watch. So I honestly don't have people hating on MAGA Girl because, as much as I disagree with the fact that they're doing it on the basis of political party and this is kind of discriminatory, at the same time, they're watching the show. And whoever's watching the show should get some voice over the say. And I think Love Island does a great job of that with the whole fan interactions and all that. And so, let them do what they want to do. There's a lot of industries that specialize in a certain fan group and audience. And so I really don't see any problem with what's been going on in that regard. But that is just about all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for listening in. I was joined by my lovely hosts of Elijah, Blair, and Christine. I was Liam bringing you through this episode of Pirate Report, and we will see you next week.